Good morning and welcome to today's daily reflection. And for once I'm going to ignore the reading set for today, which is or would be from Matthew chapter 21, which tells the story of Jesus' triumphal entry into Jerusalem, which I think is hardly appropriate for a week after we celebrated his birth. So today, 2 days after Epiphany, well, we are still in a time of angels, shepherds, and especially when we remember the wise men who visited Jesus. Although the Bible doesn't tell us how many wise men there were, the number 3 comes from the 3 gifts the wise men brought with them. So today I want to share a story with you, the story of the fourth wise man, whose name according to legend was Artaban. Apparently the Magi were all in touch with one another, and through their studies of the heavens they had been expecting the appearance of a new star in the east, signifying the birth of a great new prince. They decided that when the star appeared, they should all set off for an agreed meeting point, and from there they would all travel on together to visit this new king and pay homage. All were to take gifts, the gold, the frankincense and the myrrh, and Artaban's was to be very precious indeed. To make the trip, he sold everything he owned and put his money into 3 jewels, a sapphire, a ruby, and most precious of all, a pearl. These would be gifts he would give to the king when he came face to face with him. And in due course the star appeared, and like the others, Artaban set out for their rendezvous. But the story tells us that on his way he came across a sick man on the roadside. Being a doctor, and just like the Good Samaritan in the parable that Jesus would later tell, he could not pass by. Instead he stopped to help, and that delayed him. So when Artaban reached the meeting place, he found the others had gone on without him. But determined to catch up with him, he sold the sapphire to buy a train of fast camels to carry him quickly across the desert. But sadly he was too late. When he finally reached Bethlehem, he found the whole town in uproar. Mary and Joseph with Jesus had fled to Egypt because King Herod had given the order that all boys under the age of 2 were to be killed to get rid of this new prince, about which the other wise men had informed him. Artaban was an eyewitness of this massacre, which disgusted him. At one point, he came across a group of soldiers trying to tear a small boy from his mother's arms and kill him. Artaban hurried to stop them. Eventually, they agreed to let the mother and child go in return for the ruby. As he journeyed on, Artaban went to a synagogue to seek guidance from a rabbi. The rabbi turned to the pages of the Torah and read from the prophet Isaiah. He instructed him, if he was looking for the king in mansions, he was looking in the wrong place. Isaiah had said that the king was being sent to free the oppressed, to bring good news to the poor and sight to the blind. Look for him among the poor, not among the rich, the rabbi counselled. And so the fourth wise man journeyed on, came across a group of frightened people, discovered they were outcasts, among them lepers who had been banned from the city of Jerusalem. As a doctor, he couldn't leave them. But the one day stretched into a week into a month, and a month into a year, and the years piled up. And the Magi ceased his search. He had found a life among the outcasts, yet he kept the pearl in his pouch, just in case. One day a Magi from Persia found the camp. He was travelling to Jerusalem with his daughter and brought news of Artaban's father's death and tried to encourage him to return to his homeland. Of course he refused because by now this was his home after 30 years. Not long after this, the story started to circulate in the camp of a prophet who had the power of God to heal people. He was in Jerusalem. A young blind man who lived in the camp went to see if the stories were true, desperate to be touched by this prophet. When he arrived in Jerusalem, palm branches were being waved by the people as a man called Jesus arrived. The man asked if this was indeed the prophet. A man waving a palm branch said, "It is Jesus of Nazareth. He walks among the poor, he heals the sick, and returns sight to the blind." Unable to get near Jesus, he hurried back to the camp and told of what he had heard, especially to Artaban. The words of the rabbi flooded back to him. Elated at last, his journey appeared to be over, but in ill health, the Magi made the journey to Jerusalem with the pearl. As he arrived, as he arrived at the city, he discovered that Jesus had been arrested and was to be crucified. The Magi reasoned that with a pearl he could buy Jesus his freedom, and headed off to the palace. But along the way he met still another tragedy. The business his fellow Magi from Persia had come to start had failed. He had been killed, and his daughter was being sold into slavery to pay for his debts. He had nothing left but the pearl, and while it hurt him to do so, he offered the pearl as payment for his friend's debt, so the daughter could go free. Once again, he had missed the Saviour, because now Jesus was dead, he was too late. Artaban headed back to the camp, mourning that he had never met, grieving for the man he had never met, grieving for the lost opportunity, and broken-hearted beyond belief. His already ailing heart began to fail, and he stopped his journey to rest. While a stranger went to get water for him, another stood in front of him, almost out of nowhere, and the Magi immediately knew this was Jesus. "Saviour," he said, "I've looked for you so long, and now that you are here I have nothing to give you. The precious stones I brought for you are gone. Nothing, I have nothing." But Jesus looked at him very kindly and said, "My son, you gave me everything. When I was thirsty, you gave me a drink. When I was sick, you healed me. When I was homeless, you took me to your home. When I was imprisoned, you visited me." The Magi was puzzled, "But Lord, I've never seen you before. When did I do any of those things for you?" Jesus reached out, touched the Magi who lay dying before him, and said, "Whatever you did for the least of those brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me." And then he was gone. For a moment, the Magi looked at the place where Jesus had stood, closed his eyes, and died, fully aware that those 33 years had not been in vain, fully aware that he had served his Lord, and now finally at peace. He was buried back at the camp, which had so long been his home. And so to finish, what does this story say to us as we celebrate Christmas? It's simple, really. If we want to be followers of Jesus, his disciples, then each of us in our small way has to be like Artaban. To follow Jesus is costly. We may not have sapphires, rubies or pearls, but because everywhere we turn, we meet people in need. Need is all around us all the time. In our family, in our street, in our work or school, even in our church, there is someone who needs something from us. A visit, a listening ear, a little understanding, maybe a hug, maybe just a greeting and a smile. So let me leave you with this thought, that the real test for each of us day after day is our ability to see Jesus in everyone around us and to serve him by serving them. For often goes the Christ in a stranger's guise. It is only to those like Artaban who have found Jesus by serving others that he will say, "Truly I tell you, whatever you did for the least of those brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me." And finally, the real celebration that God appreciates is when we act justly, love mercy, and walk humbly with God. Whatever you're doing today for the rest of this week, and whatever you do for the rest of this year, may this year be a peaceful new year for all of us. Bye for now.